They say the officials are supposed to keep the game safe, but on June 17th, they disappeared. Caitlin Clark had already watched two of her teammates go down weeks earlier in a brutal game that left Sophie Cunningham with a busted tooth and Sydney Coulson with a twisted leg. No flagrant, no ejections, just silence. So when Clark took an eye poke straight to the face from the same player responsible for those injuries and got hit with a technical foul for defending herself, it was clear the refs weren't going to protect her, someone else would. And that someone was Sophie Cunningham. What happened next wasn't just a foul, it wasn't just payback. It was a statement heard across the WNBA, because when Sophie hit the court that night, she brought more than just fire, she brought justice. May 30th was supposed to be just another regular season matchup. Indiana Fever versus Connecticut Sun. A physical game? Sure. But no one expected it to turn into a war zone. From the first quarter, the Sun didn't just play tough, they played dirty. And leading the charge was Jacy Sheldon, a rookie with something to prove and no interest in pulling punches. In one game, yes, two of Indiana's core players were hurt. Sophie Cunningham took a blow to the face so vicious that part of her front tooth was knocked out. Sydney Coulson went down next after Sheldon dove for a loose ball and landed directly on Coulson's leg. Her knee twisted awkwardly beneath the pressure. Fans in the arena winced. Players stopped. But the referees? They didn't even blink. No flagrant, no technical, not even a warning. Just play on. It wasn't just physicality. It was recklessness. And it wasn't just an accident. Jacy Sheldon was at the center of both injuries, flying around the court with the kind of wild energy that crossed the line from aggressive to dangerous. You could see it in her body language. There was no hesitation, no remorse, and there certainly wasn't any punishment. For the Fever, that night changed everything. The scoreboard said 85-83, but the real loss wasn't the 2-point deficit, it was the bodies left behind. Sophie on the bench with a cracked smile, Coulson helped off the floor, and Caitlin Clark? She watched it all happen from just a few feet away, forced to stand still while her teammates were taken out by the same player who seemed to be operating above the rules. That game planted a seed, one that wouldn't take long to grow, because to fully understand what happened next, on June 17th, when things finally exploded, you have to go back even further. Beyond the Fever, beyond the WNBA, you have to go all the way back to college, to Iowa, to Ohio State, to a rivalry that started years before either of these players turned pro. Long before they ever faced off under the bright lights of the WNBA, Caitlin Clark and Jacy Sheldon were locked in a battle that went far beyond the scoreboard. Back in their college days, Clark at Iowa, Sheldon at Ohio State, the two guards were known for putting on a show every time they shared the court. But make no mistake, this wasn't just competitive fire. This was personal. Sheldon made it her mission to get under Clark's skin every single time. She'd follow her everywhere on the court, bumping her on screens, swiping at her hands during dead balls, whispering trash talk during free throws. And Clark? She gave it right back. The two didn't just play against each other, they hunted each other. It was a rivalry that lit up college arenas, filled highlight reels, and turned every matchup into a must-watch event. But when they both entered the WNBA, something changed. The stakes got higher, the contact got harder, and that old college tension, it didn't fade. It intensified, especially after May 30th, when Sheldon was directly involved in the injuries that sidelined Clark's teammates. For Clark, it wasn't just about basketball anymore, it was about respect, it was about loyalty, and above all, it was about memory. Because Caitlin doesn't forget. She doesn't forget the hits. She doesn't forget the fouls. And she definitely doesn't forget who dealt them. The next time they met on the court, Clark wouldn't just be looking for a win, she'd be looking for a reckoning. After that May 30th game, one question echoed through the WNBA community. Where were the refs? The hits were obvious. The injuries were real. And Jacy Sheldon wasn't exactly hiding her style of play, yet somehow, play after play, the whistles stayed silent. When Sophie Cunningham went down clutching her face, nothing. When Sydney Coulson's leg got twisted like a pretzel under Sheldon's body, still nothing. Not a flagrant, not a tech, not even a timeout to check the damage. It was as if the officials were watching a completely different game, one where blatant contact and dangerous aggression didn't count. And this isn't a one-off. Fans have been raising alarms for months about the rising number of contact injuries across the league. Paige Bueckers, out with a concussion. Rickea Jackson, another concussion. Caitlin Clark herself has been chucked to the floor more times than most rookies see in an entire season. Angel Reese was clotheslined just weeks earlier. The pattern is clear, and the silence from the refs is louder than ever. The WNBA loves to brag about its physical style of play. They call it gritty, intense, emotional. But there's a difference between physical and reckless. And when you let players like Sheldon dive into knees, poke eyes, and bulldoze screens without consequence, you're not protecting the game, you're breaking it. By the time June 17th rolled around, the Indiana Fever weren't just preparing for a game, they were preparing for survival. The message from the league had been received loud and clear. The officials weren't going to protect Caitlin Clark, so her teammates would. Circle the date. June 17th wasn't just another regular season game, it was the moment everything came full circle. The Indiana Fever were back on their home court, this time staring down the same Connecticut Sun team that had injured two of their own just weeks earlier. But now, Caitlin Clark was back, and this time, she was ready. Clark had just returned from a quad injury and was coming off a dominant win against the previously undefeated New York Liberty. But this game? This one felt different. You could see it in her walk during warm-ups, the way she locked eyes with Jacy Sheldon across the court. This wasn't about points. This wasn't about playoff standings. This was about memory and payback. From the jump, the energy was electric. Clark hit a deep three early, sending a clear message. She was here, and she hadn't forgotten. But Sheldon? She was right there with her, guarding Clark like her life depended on it, bumping her on screens, crowding her space, shadowing every step, just like college, but more hostile. It was tense. The crowd could feel it. The commentators could feel it. Even the referees, who had let everything slide on May 30th, looked like they were bracing for something bigger. And they were right too, because the eye poke was coming. But first, the spark, the little shoves, the trash talk, the back and forth jabs, verbal and physical. Caitlin Clark tried to stay focused, but Jacy Sheldon wasn't just playing defense. She was playing mental warfare, and the second she got too close, too aggressive, the game would erupt. And when it did, it wouldn't just be Clark in the spotlight, because someone else was waiting, watching, remembering everything. Sophie Cunningham was on the bench, and she hadn't forgotten either. Third quarter, the Fever are trailing by 10. The tension that had been simmering all game finally explodes. Caitlin Clark brings the ball up the court, focused, determined. Jacy Sheldon steps in, aggressive as ever, going for what looked like a steal. But instead, her finger jabs straight into Clark's eye. It's not subtle. It's not a graze. It's a direct hit. Clark's head jerks back from the impact, and she stumbles, grabbing her face, clearly in pain. The crowd gasps. Commentators freeze. Replay after replay shows exactly what happened. This wasn't accidental contact. It was targeted, and it came from the same player who had already taken out two of Clark's teammates just weeks before. Clark, like any competitor, pushes Sheldon away. She's not looking to escalate. She's just trying to create space, defend herself. She's blinking through the pain, squinting through the tears, trying to stay in the game. But you can see it in her face. This wasn't just physical pain. It was frustration, anger, fury, because she knew exactly what this was. A cheap shot. A dirty play, and the referees, once again clueless. Instead of punishing Sheldon, the officials hit Clark with a technical foul for pushing back. Let that sink in. She gets poked in the eye, reacts naturally, and somehow she's the one penalized. It made no sense. The crowd erupted in boos. Players pointed at the big screen in disbelief. Social media blew up in real time. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone except the people holding the whistles. It was insult on top of injury. Clark had just dropped 32 points in her first game back from injury, and now she was being punished for defending herself. The message was loud and clear. If you're Caitlin Clark, you can be fouled, poked, shoved, but the moment you react, you're the problem. But this time, Caitlin wouldn't be the only one reacting. Someone else was watching the whole thing unfold, teeth clenched, fists balled, heart pounding. Marina Mabrey was already on edge, but what she did next would make the entire arena lose its mind. What happened next was straight out of a highlight reel, only this one wasn't about a buzzer beater or a no-look pass. This was raw, this was personal, and it was the moment everything spun completely out of control. As Caitlin Clark reeled from the eye poke, trying to clear her vision and process what just happened, Marina Mabrey made her move. She didn't wait for a whistle. She didn't wait for justice. She charged. With a burst of emotion and zero hesitation, Mabrey body-checked Clark like it was a hockey game. No ball. No play. Just a blindside hit that sent Clark crashing to the floor. It was shocking. It was aggressive. And it was unmistakably intentional. The crowd lost it. The Fever bench exploded. Players from both teams jumped up, rushing toward the chaos. Coaches screamed. Fans pointed. Commentators stumbled over their words. Everyone saw what happened, but the people who mattered most still didn't get it right. Because instead of throwing Mabrey out of the game, the refs called a technical foul. That's it. Not a flagrant, not an ejection, just a slap on the wrist for what was, by every definition, a dangerous, unnecessary play. And worse, it was the same penalty they'd given Clark for merely pushing someone off her after getting eye-poked. The math didn't add up. The logic didn't exist. How do you equate a physical assault with a natural reaction to being fouled? But the referees weren't interested in logic. They reviewed the play for nearly 15 minutes. 15 minutes of watching Clark hit the ground, watching Mabrey throw her weight into the smallest player on the court, and still, they came back with nothing more than a technical. You could see it in the faces of the Indiana Fever. The message was crystal clear. If they wanted protection, they weren't going to get it from the officials. They were going to have to take matters into their own hands. And that's exactly what was about to happen. Because while Marina Mabrey walked away smirking, and Clark stood holding her face, one player hadn't moved. One player was watching it all. Silent, calm, deadly focused. Sophie Cunningham was about to remind everyone what happens when you mess with her squad. The clock was winding down. Less than a minute left. The Fever were up big, 87-70, and the win was all but sealed. But for Sophie Cunningham, this game wasn't about the scoreboard. It was about something else entirely. She watched Caitlin Clark take a poke to the eye. She watched Marina Mabrey body check her teammate like it was the Stanley Cup. And she watched the referees do what they'd done all night. Absolutely nothing. The same helpless feeling from May 30th was back, but this time, Sophie wasn't going to sit and take it. Jacy Sheldon had the ball on a fast break, driving toward the rim for a meaningless late-game layup. She didn't see Cunningham coming, but Sophie saw her and she remembered everything. May 30th, the chipped tooth, the injury, the silence. June 17th, the eye poke, the ejection-worthy hit, the silence again. Sophie closed the distance in a split second, stepped in front of Sheldon, and wrapped her up mid-air, hard. It wasn't a basketball play. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't supposed to be. She didn't slam her, didn't injure her, but she made her point crystal clear. You don't mess with my team. The crowd gasped. The benches stirred, and just like that, chaos. Jacy Sheldon hit the ground. Players rushed in. Coaches tried to pull them apart. What started as a flagrant foul turned into a full-on scuffle that spilled into the sidelines. For a moment, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like a war. The refs huddled at the monitor again, finally forced to act. Sophie Cunningham was hit with a flagrant 2 and immediately ejected. Jacy Sheldon and Lindsay Allen got tossed too for their role in the aftermath. But it didn't matter. The damage was done, and it wasn't physical. It was psychological. This wasn't just a foul. This was a message. A public warning to the rest of the league that if the officials won't enforce boundaries, the Indiana Fever will. And Sophie? She didn't flinch. As she walked off the court, the crowd roared her name. Fans chanted, "Sophie, Sophie!" And her jersey started selling out before she even hit the tunnel. She wasn't just a player anymore. She was a symbol of loyalty, protection, and fearless retaliation. Because in a league where star players were being targeted and the officials looked the other way, Sophie Cunningham stood on business. The buzzer eventually sounded, but nobody was thinking about the final score. Yes, the Fever won, 88-71. Yes, Caitlin Clark led with 20 points and 6 assists. And yes, Natasha Howard racked up her 50th career double-double, but none of that was what people were talking about. All eyes were on Sophie Cunningham. Her flagrant foul dominated headlines, social media, and post-game interviews. Clips of the takedown were everywhere, slowed down, zoomed in, set to dramatic music, and posted with captions like "Standing on Business" and "Real One Energy." Fever fans flooded the comment sections, calling her Spicy Sophie, and by the end of the night, her jersey was trending online. What she did wasn't about stats or glory. It was about protection. It was about sending a message the referees refused to deliver. You do not target our star. You do not injure our players and walk away smiling. You do not poke, shove, and body check your way through our team without consequences. And most importantly, you do not do that when Sophie Cunningham is watching. Meanwhile, the refs tried to save face by handing out matching technicals and one flagrant. But fans, players, and analysts weren't buying it. The punishment didn't fit the crime, and everyone knew it. People weren't just mad at Mabrey or Sheldon. They were mad at the system that allowed this kind of chaos to boil over in the first place. Coach Stephanie White spoke for all of them when she exploded in the post-game press conference. When the officials don't control the game, this is what happens, she said. This isn't just one game. This has been happening all season long. And she was right. June 17th wasn't a fluke. It was the result of months of officials refusing to protect star players and letting reckless aggression run wild. So the Fever took matters into their own hands, and the league felt it. This wasn't just fallout. It was a firestorm, and the whole WNBA was watching. By the end of the night, one thing was clear. Justice in the WNBA doesn't always come from the whistle. Sometimes it comes from a teammate who's had enough. Caitlin Clark may be the face of the franchise, but on June 17th, Sophie Cunningham was its spine. While the referees looked the other way again and again, Sophie didn't. She remembered the chipped tooth, the twisted knee, the eye poke, and the body check. And when the time came, she acted. And let's be real, it wasn't dirty. It was intentional. It was powerful. And it was overdue. What she delivered was the kind of flagrant foul that sends a message, not just to Jacy Sheldon, but to every player and every referee in the league. If you come for the Fever, you better be ready for the response, because this team isn't soft. They don't forget, and they don't let their own go unprotected. This wasn't revenge. This was a warning. Clark didn't need to throw punches or shout into a mic. She let her game speak. Step-back threes, no-look passes, cold composure under pressure. But Sophie? Sophie was the muscle behind the message, the one who reminded everyone that stars shine brighter when they know someone's got their back. In a season where officials consistently failed to protect the league's most talked-about player, Cunningham did the job they wouldn't, and the fans saw it. They respected it, and they rallied behind it. The truth is, you can't teach loyalty, you can't fake chemistry, and you definitely can't ignore what the Indiana Fever just showed the world. When the system breaks down, real teams take care of their own. What happened on June 17th wasn't just a game, it was a statement. The Indiana Fever didn't just win on the scoreboard, they won in spirit, in unity, in defiance, and they did it together. Caitlin Clark showed the world she could take the hits and still lead. Sophie Cunningham proved that loyalty means stepping up when it matters most, and the entire Fever roster reminded the league that talent alone doesn't define a team. Heart does. Now, they're heading to their first ever Commissioner's Cup final, but no matter what happens in that game, the legacy of June 17th is already written. The Fever drew a line in the sand. They made it known. This team is done being the target. They are no longer the ones taking hits without an answer, because when the refs won't protect them, they'll protect each other. It wasn't just about Sophie's foul or Clark's stare or the chants echoing through the arena. It was about a shift, a transformation, a moment when a young team decided it would no longer be bullied or ignored, when they chose to fight, not just for points, but for pride. And if you're a Fever fan, that night gave you something more powerful than a win. It gave you a team worth believing in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of the drama, the highlights, or the heart behind this game. Because this season, it's personal, and we're just getting started.